Thank you, Dr. Beatrice. I know that was very informative, and I hope we will take some principles. I'm looking forward to the Century trailer tomorrow. So now we're going to move into our next presentation. This is moving into the Family Ministries area, which is the other department that I represent. And I'm so happy we have Dr. Les Ackie with us today. And he is going to present on the subject of balancing priorities in the family, balancing priorities in the family. Dr. Ackie is the BUC Family Ministries Director. He also has children's possibilities, and he just seems to have a range of things, safeguarding, and does so much, really. He's worked in ministry for over 29 years. And in family ministries, I think, for over 13 years. He's also a trainer as well, preparing Enrich. He's got a DMin from Andrews University, and he was a guest lecturer at Newbold in the area of pastoral psychology and counseling. He's also been married. His wonderful wife, Irma, and I know they have 2 children. Well, they almost adults now, isn't it? yes. So we're really happy to have him today. Just before he comes up as well, I do just want to highlight, I'm going to try and see if I can get a spot to do this also later. In your booklets on page 14, you will notice there is the counselling service advertised. Now, normally that phone number is just as an answering machine and someone gets back to you. We're happy to have Dee Kiriako with us for the week or a few days we're here. Trained counsellor and psychotherapist, and we are using the Duncan room, which is Duncan room 5, just opposite where the press are upstairs. We want you to avail yourself. We realize this would only be the beginning here, but sometimes we need to talk. It's not enough just to say, I'm going to pray for you. Sometimes we have issues. It could be relationship issues. It could be emotional issues. Whatever they are, this is an opportunity to begin that process, and the counsellors are available here. So the room is upstairs, very private. Please ring that number. The number is there, 07539 211 442, 07539 211 442. Ring the number, book an appointment. If you're really stuck, you can come and see me, and we can arrange for you to have an appointment, but make use of it while we're here, because it's available. And I think what we may try and make sure we're up there between 4 and 5 today and tomorrow anyway, at least. So if you want to come and have a chat, please come. So that's Duncan room 5. But I'm happy now to pass on to Pastor Ackie. Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Do you need to stand up, have a stretch? Feel free to do so. I want the oxygen to be flowing around your brains. Now we're going to have hopefully, an interactive session. So I'm going to be asking some questions. If you are minded to answer, please wait until a microphone arrives for the sake of the recording. But hopefully we can have some input from you. So we're looking at balancing priorities in the family. As Pastor Francis mentioned, I am the Family Ministries Director for the British Union, and I'm in Family Ministries because I strongly believe that the family is the foundation of the church. If we can get it right in the family context, then we can get it right in the wider context of the church. Because Ellen White makes the point that the family is a little church. So we get it right there, we get it right in the larger church. So let's have a look and see what the Bible informs us. The Bible tells us in Genesis that we are created in God's image. So God creates Adam and Eve, and his intention was that Adam would reflect God's image to Eve. Eve would reflect God's image to Adam. Adam and Eve would reflect God's image to their children, and their children would reflect God's image to their children through posterity throughout time. So the family is the primary mechanism for the transmission of God's values. The Bible says in 2 Timothy 1 and verse 5, I have been reminded of your sincere faith, a faith passed on from your grandmother Lois to your mother Eunice, and now to you. So this is God's intention, that we receive his values and we pass that on to future generations. Now, in the book Covenant, John H. Walton says this: God, in his desire to be known, is engaged in a program of self-revelation, and that the primary mechanism he uses is covenant. So God does not deal with us outside of the context of covenant. He made a covenant with Adam and Eve, covenant with Abraham, covenant with Moses, a covenant with David, and in the New Testament we have the new covenant. So God deals with us within the context of covenant. Marriage is another covenant that God deals with us through, for want of better English. Now, his purpose with the covenants is to make himself known. Exodus 3 and verse 15, this is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. John 17:3, and this is life eternal, that they might know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. So this is God's purpose, and this is why he brought the family into being. Now, this challenge that we have is bigger than us. The challenge to make God known is bigger than us. We cannot do it in our own strength. It is a high calling that we have been called to. Now, Ephesians chapter 6 rather. Ephesians chapter 6 is about what? It's about what? What comes to mind when you hear Ephesians 6? The spiritual warfare. It's just right there. You know, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians chapter 5 is about what? Can you recall? It deals with family relations. Now, I don't think that's an accident. That the spiritual warfare spoken about in Ephesians chapter 6 follows Ephesians chapter 5, which talks about family and relational issues, because I believe that the family is the primary battleground for the great controversy. The enemy knows that if he can destroy the family, he can destroy the church. If he can destroy the church, he can destroy the society. It is Satan's studied effort. And notice what she says here. It is his studied effort. He is trying to work out ways to pervert the marriage institution, to weaken its obligations, and lessen its sacredness. Has that happened in our society? The enemy is intentional about destroying the family, destroying marriages. Now, if he is that intentional about destroying marriages, we should be that much more intentional about preserving them. Listen to what she says again. She says, his, that is Satan's work, is to bring into every family the cruel elements of self-will, harshness, and selfishness. So he is intentional. Listen to this, Sons and Daughters of God 2:5-5. Men and women are measured in the scales of heaven in accordance with that which they reveal, where? In their home life. Now notice she's not saying here that we are measured in the scales of heaven with that which we reveal in church. That's not about the Bible studies we give or the sermons that we preach or the tracts that we give out. Now, why would she say that? Why would how we operate within the context of the home be the scales by which we are measured in the scale of heaven? If we got the roving mic, why do you think this is? Okay, we have two hands. Okay, the mic is coming at the front here. Why is the family life the measure?
Because you don't put on airs and graces there, you're what you are.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? You know, when we're in a family, we are not wearing the ecclesiastical garb, and we are who we are. Sis?
It's similar to what the sisters say. When we're in public, we wear a mask.
Yeah.
We pretend to be something that we're not.
Don't we?
In the home, we are who we are.
Yeah. That's right. When we're in public, when we're in a church context, we put our best foot forward. But we are most authentic when we're with the people that we know the most. Which is why one of the problems that we have in terms of our young people is that they see how we live at home compared to how we operate within the church context. And if they see a difference there, that level of hypocrisy is a massive barrier to them receiving Jesus Christ as personal Savior. Dwight Moody said this, the great 19th century evangelist: "If I want to find out whether a man was a Christian, I wouldn't go to his minister. I would go and ask who? Ask his wife. We need more Christian life at home. If a man doesn't treat his wife right, I don't want to hear him talk about Christianity." Ain't that the truth? You know? For the same reason we just stated, that we are most authentic in our closest relationships at home. I am grateful that I have a wife who is confidential. You know, otherwise. All right. So again, Ellen White says this: "He, that is Satan, seeks to destroy the happiness of the family." Now, why would he do a thing like that? He knows that the spirit governing in the home will be brought where? Into the church. So sometimes when you see you have problems in the church, sometimes you need to look to find out what is going on within the home. Because when somebody mentioned the magic pavement. Have you heard about the magic pavement? The magic pavement, the pavement outside church. So you can be at home and you could be arguing. You know, you can get in the car and you can be vexed traveling to church, but as soon as you step onto that magic pavement, how you doing? We put on the mask. So, people who are cantankerous in church don't become so when they arrive at church. They bring that stuff from home. So this is why we need to make sure that we are building up, we are nurturing, we are strengthening the home, because what is experienced in the home will be replicated within the church context. So here's the truth: we cannot raise children above the level of spiritual and emotional temperature that we are experiencing. So if we want our children to be faithful, if we want our children to be loving, if we want our children to be committed, these are things that we need to be mirroring to them. We cannot take people on a journey that we are not traveling ourselves. So if we want children who are emotionally healthy, then we need to take care of our own emotional health. By the way, the author, Peter Scazzero, he's got some excellent books I highly recommend on spirituality. Okay, so the family is subjected to internal as well as external pressures. We already mentioned how the enemy of our soul is dedicated to destroying the family. But there are other pressures. There are financial pressures. There are relational pressures. There are all kinds of pressures, both outside and inside the church, which requires us to look to God for help. Now, Matthew 10 and verse 37. "He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." So God is saying here that I need to be number one priority, the most important relationship in your life. But then in 1 Peter 5 and verse 8, we are told, Paul says, "But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." Somebody who doesn't know, never known God, doesn't want to know God. He's saying that, listen, if you don't look after your family, then you are worse than an infidel, an unbeliever. And looking after our family doesn't just mean putting food on the table, making sure they've got a roof over their heads. It means taking care of their spiritual, emotional, physical, and intellectual needs. It is not uncommon for spouses to be living quiet lives of depression and yet be reluctant to express their legitimate needs for fear of being seen as an obstacle of God's work. How many of us are busy in church? You know, we are committed, hopefully. We are committed to serving the Lord. And hopefully we realize how the Lord has blessed us with spiritual gifts for the edification of the church. But it is possible for us to prioritize church over family. Isn't it? You know, when I became a pastor many moons ago, 30-odd years ago, when I came into ministry, I wanted to save the world. You know, I was excited about ministry. But the mistake that I made was that I did exactly what I just mentioned. I prioritized my family, the church, over my family, which caused a crisis in my marriage, to the point where myself and my wife and my two brothers and their wives had some meetings together to talk about the issues in our marriages. And in that meeting, my wife said something. She said, "I can't compete with God. I can't compete with God. Because as a minister, I could say, I'm about my Father's business. But here's what my brother said to me. He calls me pastor as a term of endearment. He says, "Pastor, I don't care how many sermons you preach. I don't care how many people you baptize. I don't care how many Bible studies you give. If you are not looking after your wife and children, you are not doing God's will." And I had to hear that from him because I wasn't hearing it from her. So we need to get our priorities right. Henry Wright, one of my favorite preachers, I think he's done some brilliant work here in the North. He said that we are living in a time where the choice is not necessarily between that which is important and that which is unimportant. He says that we may need to leave aside that which is important, that we may do that which is essential. Which means that a lot of important things may have to be ignored, may have to be put aside, so that we can do that which is essential. Which means that we have to prioritize and be clear on what our responsibilities are. When I was at Newbold College, Dr. Jeff Brown was my lecturer in my class, Marriage and Family. I have a lot of love for Dr. Jeff Brown. He was my sponsor in my doctorate. He dragged me through that doctorate. I've learned so much from him. And it's from him that I first understood the concept of prioritizing. So the priority is God, family, church. We tend to switch those last two around. Because when it comes to compromising, oftentimes it's our families who get the short end of the stick because they love us anyhow. But the priority is to make sure that family get the best of us, and then the church. You traveled on a plane, you've heard this. Remember to secure your own mask before assisting others. Why? If you are incapacitated, you can't help anybody. So for us to be of best use to our families, we have to make sure that we are feeding ourselves spiritually, that we are looking after ourselves physically, that we are improving intellectually, that we can be the best that we can be so that we can feed into others. You know, we talk about making sacrifices and giving ourselves to others. Well, if we are going to give ourselves to others, we better have something good to give. So we need to take care of ourselves. There is a danger of burnout. And burnout is a serious problem. It's a serious problem in ministry. It's a serious problem in life in general. Burnout is when we are giving out more than we are receiving for ourselves. Running on empty. So we need to take good care of ourselves. The best thing that we can do for our families is to look after our spiritual, emotional, physical, and intellectual health. Jesus, with his disciples, you know, he sends them out on their missionary endeavors, and they come back excited, telling him about all the wonderful things that they have done. You can read about it in the Desire of Ages. And while they are celebrating and high-fiving and excited about everything that they had done, Jesus was concerned about them. And he said to them, "Come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat." So Jesus was looking after their spiritual, emotional, and their physical needs. Now, how many of us here have a financial budget that we operate? I see some hands. Why? What is the purpose of a budget? Why do we need a budget? So we don't overspend. And the possibility of overspending exists because we have to balance the books, because our money is limited. Now, if you are a billionaire, you don't have to worry about budgets. But because our money is limited, we need to budget. Now, how many of you have a limited amount of time? That's every person in the place. Our time is limited. And if our time is limited, we need to do what? We need to budget our time. Budgeting our time is a necessity. Ephesians chapter 5. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. So, unseized time surrenders to the tyranny of the urgent. So, whatever is shouts the loudest, whatever is the most urgent will absorb our time. It is important for us to be clear about what our priorities are. What are our non-negotiables? I remember one time, I'm not the most organized person. And year on year, early in my ministry, I would struggle when it came to planning. But this one year I decided, you know what, I'm going to crack this thing. And so I sat down for hours working through the calendar of events and working through my preaching plan. And when I finished, I was so proud of myself. And I took it to my wife and I said to her, look, And she took one look at it and said, "Where are our holidays?" We need to plan, but we need to plan wisely. Because our time will flow towards those areas that are urgent but not necessarily important. So get hold of your diary and put into your diary the things that are most important, the things that are the non-negotiables. So if spending time with your spouse or your family member or your best friend or whoever, if that is important, diarize it. If spending time with your children is important, diarize it. And when you put all of those important things, looking after yourself, going to the club to exercise or whatever your form of exercise is, if that is important to you, diarize it. And then that benefits you. Number one, you know what you're supposed to be doing when, but also when people try to pull on your time, you can look on your diary and say, "Sorry, not available. I have an appointment." You don't have to tell them what the appointment is. "Sorry, I have an appointment at that time." And that might just be you going for a walk with your spouse or what have you. But it's important to diarize, to schedule and budget our time. Allow lesser priorities to flow around the non-negotiables into two available slots. That's what we just mentioned. Boundaries. Boundaries. A lack of effective boundaries will blur the lines of responsibility. Now, what are boundaries? What are boundaries? You hear boundary, give me a word. Fence.
Property line.
Rules, did I hear? Rules.
It's a property line.
Restrictions, property lines, absolutely. All of these represent boundaries. Boundaries, in terms of our relationships, is essentially what's okay, what's not okay. And that's going to be different from person to person. But once we are clear about what our boundaries are, and we communicate our boundaries to others, we can be clear about what's mine and what's not mine. Because this is what boundaries is all about. It's about ownership. If I know what belongs to me, I also know what doesn't belong to me. If I know what I'm responsible for, I also know what I'm not responsible for. And that's important because one of the reasons why we overstretch ourselves is that we take on responsibilities that belong to other people. And that why we may think we are helping them, we may be encouraging them in laziness, taking on something which they need to be doing for themselves. So we need to be clear in our boundaries, not only know what our boundaries are, but also communicate them. Because once you've communicated them, you can hold people responsible when they try to transgress those boundaries. All right, I like this from Elton Trueblood. He was an entrepreneur. He said this: a public man, though he is necessarily available at many times, must learn to hide. If he is always available, he is not worth enough when he is available. So, this is one of the things I had to learn in ministry. And it is especially in this day and age with the advent of the mobile phone. You know, back in the olden days, you know, when we just had a telephone line in the house, it wasn't so easy for folks to get a hold of you. But now everybody has these mobile phones, and we can be on call 24/7. Sometimes it's okay to let that call go through to the answer phone. Sometimes it's necessary, and we may have to bite our lip because sometimes we are so curious to know who's trying to get a hold of me. Sometimes you need to carve out time for yourself. The way I work, I need dedicated, uninterrupted time. if there are constant interruptions, that just breaks my flow and stifles my creativity. Sometimes it's important for us to know how to hide. And Jesus did this, didn't he? How busy, or I say how busy was Jesus? Do we ever see Jesus rushing in the New Testament? Yeah, he came to save the world. But you don't see him rushing because he was very clear about what his mission was. This is the point I made earlier. As goes the family, so goes the church. The health of our families and the well-being of the church depend on each other. Which is why it breaks my heart when we, when it comes around to nominating committee time and we kind of relegate family ministries to, let's sort out all the important departments and then what's left, who is it? Family ministries is like a thread that goes through all the other ministries. Stewardship, if you're dealing with your financial matters and your health matters and your all those things that pertain to what God has given to us, all of that happens within the context of family. Health issues within the context of family, youth issues within the context of family. So family ministries is like that thread. So we need to be cognizant of that and organize our ministries in a way that ministers to the families in our congregations. 1 Timothy 3 verse 5, for if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? This goes back to that statement I quoted from Ellen White, where she says that the family is a small church. And what Paul was saying here was, look, if you cannot get things right within the family context, organize your home in terms of your spiritual needs, emotional needs, physical needs, then how on earth are you going to be effective in the church context? Mercy indeed. So, here's the quote. Every family is a church over which the parents preside. The first consideration of the parents should be to work for the salvation of their children. Now, if you think about healthy church, there was a book written by a guy called Christian Schwartz called Natural Church Development, and he identified key aspects of what healthy church should look like. And some of those aspects you can see here. So the family should be about empowering leadership. Parenting should be about empowering our children to become the best that they can be. Passionate spirituality. If we are not excited about our faith, why would we expect our children to be? Loving relationships. Goes back to the point we were making earlier. If our children do not grow up in a context in which they are experiencing love and nurture and affirmation and all these wonderful things, Christianity means nothing. So loving relationships should be exemplified within the context of the family and will then spread out to other contexts. Gift discovery. One of the reasons we have problems with folks serving in church is that we have not laid an effective foundation. So that when they get to a certain age, we say, well, now, you need to be serving in church. Well, what have we done to help them discover their giftedness from when they are young? Now, can children have spiritual gifts? Are you sure? Now, what is the purpose of a spiritual gift? To build up the church. A spiritual gift is given to us for the purpose of evangelism, for serving the church, for edifying the church. Now, if children can experience or receive spiritual gifts, what are the implications? I mean, if they can receive spiritual gifts, we have a responsibility to provide the opportunities for them to exercise their gifts. If we believe they can receive spiritual gifts. Because if we don't, then we won't bother. Service and outreach, same principle. Ellen White says that when our children are old enough, they should be, as soon as our children are old enough, they should be given responsibilities within the home. We encourage our children in indolence when we do everything for them. So balancing priorities in terms of parenting. Who we are and how we engage with the world are much stronger predictors of how our children will turn out than what we know about parenting. So you know, all these books you can buy about that parenting 101, yeah, you know, parenting is not one size fits all. Parenting is about knowing your children so that you can guide them in a direction. You know, where Solomon says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart. So we often read that passage incorrectly. We read it, train up a child in the way we think they should go. But that's not what he's saying. The word way in that passage indicates the leaning or the bent or the according to the personality and characteristic of the child. In other words, know the child so that you can guide them in the direction that's right for them. How many of you have more than one child? If you have children. Are they the same personality? No. So should we love our children the same? Should we treat them the same? Well. You know, if you might have one child who is an extrovert, one child who is an introvert. They will respond to different things. One child, you may just have to look at them. The other child might be, and you may need to use other means. So we love them the same, but we don't necessarily treat them the same. And in order to know how to treat, we need to get to know them, spend time in their presence. George Barna, brilliant researcher in the area of family and parenting, he says, according to the research, parents typically have no plan for the spiritual development of their children. Don McClafferty, who created the Kids in Discipleship ministry, I was fortunate to be the pastor of the first church to run Kids in Discipleship in Europe. And we went and did the training with him in America. And during the training, he posed this question. And that question is stuck in my head. He said, the enemy has plans for your children. Do you? The enemy has plans for your children. Do you? We need to be intentional. So, the Shema, Hebrew prayer, famous prayer, Deuteronomy chapter 6. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children when you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. What strikes you from this passage? Just key ideas. What strikes you? Teach. Yeah.
A continual talking to them about the Word of God.
A continual. So this is not just, on one day of the week. This is about lifestyle. When you sit down, when you rise up, when you walk by the way. What else is, what do you see here as the prerequisite for effectively instructing our children?
Yeah, I think oftentimes we talk about the teaching, but the Bible clearly states that first you've got to love the Lord. the Lord your God with all your heart. That is the premise from which you should come. And then you're going to teach that to their children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is the prerequisite. If we have the love of God within our hearts, and you see there in the diagram, God shares his love towards us. We respond to his love, and when his love abides within our heart, it then flows out to impact those who are around us. So when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to love, this cannot be in one direction. You cannot love God and treat people like dirt. If you have the love of God abiding in your heart, it will flow out into your other relationships. It will dictate how you relate to other people. But the first prerequisite is the love of God abiding within our hearts. But then that love needs to translate into action. We then need to teach. We then need to guide. We then need to disciple, because parenting is effectively discipling. Because none of our children are born Adventists. They're not born Christians. So parenting is a form of discipleship. It is a form of evangelism. Rob Parsons wrote this book, Getting Your Kids Through Church Without Them Ending Up Hating God. Isn't that a challenge? And this can happen when we prioritize the church over our children. It can happen when we are not consistent in the way that we treat them at home with the way that we operate within the church. It can happen when we create a erroneous picture of who God is. Because you know what? Where children get their concept of God from? When I did my doctorate on family worship, and one of the books I read, it was a book called The Spiritual Child. And the research backed up what we know instinctively, that children get their concept of God from their parents, which is a daunting prospect. That's a solemn thought. But here's the thing. We don't have to be perfect parents. You know, we need to cut ourselves some slack. What the research indicates is that children don't need perfect parents, they need good enough parents. Parents who are going to set them on the right track. Ellen White says to parents that you may be what? Evangelists in the home, ministers of, not religion, ministers of grace to your children. I love this one from Ellen White. She says, if the parents would enter more fully into the feelings of their children and draw out what is on their hearts, it would have a beneficial influence upon them. Now, what does it mean to enter more fully into the feelings of your children? How do you enter fully into your children's feelings? How does that happen? Anybody? How do you enter into the feelings of your children? You have to know them. Okay, unpack that for me. How do you know your child? You listen to them. Yeah.
A child will only open up to you if you have a good relationship with that child. If they believe that they can trust you, and you're parents that will listen and will be non-judgmental, then you will have that opportunity to enter into the heart of that child.
Amen. Amen.
Also put yourself into their shoes. That might also help, yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I love that. I love those two comments. So why would our children open up their hearts to us if they don't trust us? So we first have to be a safe place for our children so that they can feel that if they tell us what's going on in their hearts, we are not going to judge them, we're not going to tear them down, we're not going to harshly criticize them. Because when we do that, we force them to suppress what they feel. Again, the point you made was, again, my brain's getting old. You said, put yourself in their place. Give me another word for that. Empathy. Step into their world. And this takes effort. Because if you have a small child and you are a big grown hardback adult who was a child a very long time ago, it can be difficult to put yourself in their place. But it's something that we need to practice. A quick illustration, we were at a camp meeting we were doing family camp in Norway. And my son, he must have been about 3, and we went into the communal showers. And when I took him into the shower block, and as soon as he saw the shower block, he just stiffened up, frightened. And then I'm thinking to myself, boy, we're in a rush, just get into the thing. But then I stopped for a moment, and then I looked at this thing, and it looked like some kind of ancient torture chamber. And so I just stopped for a moment and turned on the water, showed him that he wasn't very hot, put my hand under it, and then he calmed down. But that just required me to take a moment to see the situation from his perspective. So stepping into other people's shoes doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to end up agreeing with them, but what it does do, it helps you to see to learn their story. Helps you to come to a place where you can develop a relationship even when you don't agree. So yeah, thank you for that point. And she talks about drawing out. How many of you have encountered teenagers who, when they reach a certain age, all of a sudden, all of that learning and the vocabulary that you help to instill in them, all of a sudden that disappears and they become monosyllabic. What did you do at school today? Nothing. What did you? So sometimes, in order to get them to talk, we need to probe a little. We need to be persistent, and draw out what is going on within their hearts. Because sometimes they want to talk, but they're kind of nervous about how it's going to be received. But we push a little more and show them that it's okay. We're not going to judge them. They will open up. All right. Okay, we're getting near the clock. Okay. 0 to 14. What do you think this number represents? 0 to 14. Take a wild guess. What do you think it represents? 0 to 14. Some research been done around this time period. 0 to 14. Again? The period during which they will listen to you. It's close. You're in the ballpark. Yeah. 0 to 14. Anybody else want to take a guess? My brother? When they will communicate with you?
I suspect, given the age, that it's the time when you have the most influence of your child's development.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, that age is a bit inquisitive and they want to know almost everything.
Yeah. Ellen White talks about the early formative years. There is the Jesuits had this saying, give me the child until he is 7 and I will show you the man. Well, there has been research And Ellen White says something very similar. George Barna, the researcher I mentioned earlier, he found that the ages 0 to 14 represents the window of opportunity we have to shape our children's Christian worldview. What he has found is that by the time a child reaches 14, they have probably developed the worldview they will die with. Now, that doesn't negate the ability for the Holy Spirit to influence them and change them and convert their hearts. But what they learn in those years is programmed in, which is why it's more difficult to influence people after the age of 14. So when people say, when they're older, they can make those kinds of decisions. No, children do not grow in a vacuum. If they are not being influenced from a biblical worldview, they're being influenced from a secular worldview or another worldview. Our work for Christ is to begin where? With the family in the home. There is no missionary field more important than this. Ellen White is not playing games with words. As important as it is to go out and evangelize the masses in our communities and to go to far-flung lands, she's saying, look, just imagine, what would our church look like if the only thing we did was hold our children? If that's all we did. If we want our children to internalize grace and truth, we must model these qualities. Psalm 40 verse 11 says, "Do not withhold your mercy from me, Lord. May your love and faithfulness always protect me." Remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. This is our responsibility. It's our responsibility as parents and as leaders to be the example so that when our children see us, our young people see us, they will want to imitate us. Leave you with Joshua's commitment. As for me, my house, we will serve the Lord. Whatever the pressures are out there, whatever the temptations, whatever the enemy chooses to do against us, whatever pressures are brought to bear on our family, this needs to be our commitment. Whatever happens, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And when Joshua said that, he was speaking on behalf of his family. And he could say that because he had the respect of his family. This is our commitment. Any questions, observations, pearls of wisdom? I think we have, 5 minutes? Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ackie, for that presentation. Very enlightening, but also very useful. The question I want to pose to you is, as Seventh-day Adventist, I noticed you quoted Ellen White extensively, which I really appreciate. We've got all this information, but yet, as you probably know, in the Adventist Church, there are more divorces than we can imagine. So how do we reconcile what we have with what we're doing with what we have, considering where we are at this time? Because if we have all this and then we are having all these divorces, something is not really adding up.
Yeah. I wish I had a simple answer to that one. Ellen White said that if we were faithful to God's word, we wouldn't need her writings. So at the end of the day, we have choices. And as much as we know, if I said to you, and we had Sister Beatrice, Dr. B presented on health. If I said to you, do you know what it takes to live a healthy life? Well, what a healthy diet is? Could you tell me? Could you tell me? You know what New Start is. We know about sunlight, and we know about how many of us live it? An intellectual understanding is not enough. We need to, first of all, have a heart commitment. Because at the end of the day, the enemy is trying to destroy marriages. If we are not fully committed to God, then we're fighting a losing battle. I think one of the issues that we have, I was having a conversation this morning with a colleague, and I think in terms of our church, we need to begin to reprioritize how we do church. Let me come back to what I said a couple of times in this presentation. As goes the family, so goes the church. It is good for us to have an evangelistic mindset. But if we compare how much money we give to public evangelism, evangelistic outreach, compared to how much money we commit to supporting families, how does it compare? In terms of our departments, how much money do we give to children's ministries compared to how much money we give to evangelistic outreach? How does it balance off? So where are our priorities? I think for me, we need to be a lot more intentional about ministries that support relationships. Because if a couple, and I know, it grieves my heart the number of phone calls I get in a given week asking for support, counseling support for marriages that are falling apart. And I wish I had numerous avenues where I could refer people left, right, and center. They're not there. As a church, I don't think we have invested sufficiently in ministries that support healthy relationships. And as a result, relationships are falling apart. I'm not sure that is the complete answer to that. I'm not sure there is even a complete answer to that question, but I think that is part of the problem, that we need to invest more on ministries that support relationships.
I endorse.
Because if we don't, what are we bringing people into? Sorry. Okay, very good question. Pastor, you want to? Which statistics is he was asking for? Yeah, I'm not familiar with that research. Let me say something on the wider church. There is a general view out there. Have you heard that 1 in 2 marriages, or the statement that marriages in the church are failing at the same level as marriages in the society? Have you heard that statistic? Not true. We had a lady come to Andrews University, and she wrote a book about this and did the research and wanted to find out where that statistic came from. She traced it back to the author I mentioned earlier, George Barna. And he did a body of research which referred to people who identified themselves as Christians. So nominal Christians, people who are coming from a Christian heritage. But when the research was actually done in terms of people who are in church, who attend church regularly, who study the Bible and who pray, that statistic indicated that the level of divorce within the church was minuscule compared to divorce within the general society. So the picture is not as bleak as it is often painted. So I can speak to that. The research in terms of the Adventist church, I'm not familiar with that.
I was going to pick up on Dr. Palmer's point. It might have been an element of frustration surfacing. However, I think there's a principle, which is there is a maybe an undercurrent of concern about the well-being of the church. I don't want to make it sound obscure, but essentially, I don't know if, my question, if I'm going to try and be pointed, is what mechanisms are we implementing going forward, given our evaluation of our past? Because if we've always done the things if we do the things we've always done, then going forward, we're not going to really deal with the problems we've always had. So what I have observed, I know I'm trying to ask a question at the same time comment, what I've observed is that even at this camp, which I welcome, we're happy that we've got camp meeting again. That's for the older ones. It's a well-trodden ground for us in terms of our renewal and rejuvenation. What I have observed is there is now a need for conversation that I think we seemingly are too busy to devote the time to. Most people just want to talk about their problem. I know you mentioned it earlier, Pastor. That's all problems ostensibly will be resolved and can be resolved through conversation. So this mechanical process we have about church, this process that we have called church, whilst in its well-meaning, we mustn't overlook the important factors, the importance of communication. When the people talk, you'd be amazed how much is resolved.
Yeah.
So that's my pen in terms of us addressing the question. We need to understand that. Any dynamic setting you may have, we involve people.
Yeah.
It must essentially be a conversation.
Yeah.
The mechanics beyond that will actually resolve themselves.
You know, yeah, I think you make a good point. And as you were speaking, what came to mind was a comment that Ellen White made about the importance of small companies. You know, it is not always easy to have the conversation in a forum like this, because we don't necessarily know the people who are around us. We don't necessarily feel safe. But in small groups, where we have that opportunity to practice authenticity, to be open, we can have more effective conversations. I myself and my wife, from time to time, we run marriage retreats. And one of the things that those retreats taught me was that when you take a group of people away from the larger church context and you create a safe environment, people will open up their hearts. When we ourselves also are authentic. Because one of the things that we decided when we did our marriage retreat is that we would mirror or model what we would want from those couples. So the more we were open in our sharing, it kind of gave other people permission to do the same. So in terms of the conversation, we need to be intentional about creating the forum, fora, is that the plural? Yeah, in which those conversations can be had. And that might mean us taking the initiative to do it if it's not happening in if the leadership, whatever that leadership may be, from union, conference, whatever, if that's not happening, take responsibility for us to create those kind of forum. I don't know. But I think your point is well taken.
Mine is just a comment, Dr. Ackie. I'm very, very grateful for the work that is being done. to create healthier families and families that communicate with each other. And I'm also grateful to know that couples that are getting married lately, I mean, Dan and I, we've been invited to about 6 weddings so far this year, and we've got 2 more to attend. And I understand that counseling takes place, which is fantastic. One aspect which I think is we need to develop more and focus more is how to train young newly marrieds to prepare for parenting, to be parents. Those 2 aspects, I think, if we were able to, work on them, it might make a difference, perhaps.
Yeah. No, I think it's an excellent observation. There is so much that we could do, but I think that's a brilliant observation. I am one who beats the drum for rigorous premarital preparation. I am a authorized trainer for Prepare Enrich, which is a premarital and marital enrichment tool. And we are encouraging all of our ministers to be trained. Pastor France has done an excellent job of encouraging our ministers to be trained. And that is about just spending quality time with couples to take them through a process so that when they make that final decision, they're making an informed decision going forward. But I think your point about taking that a step further and preparing them for parenting in the long run, it is part of the premarital, but something more extensive, I think, would help. Yeah, thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you for what you're saying, Pastor Ackie. But my problem, that's my soapbox that I'm fighting on for years. I'm from Manchester South. We have a big church there and a big community, other churches around. And some of us are getting older, including myself. And we said, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Our children is in that as well. Our youth in our church. And we have a church, a pastor carrying 5 different churches. 1 pastor. We don't have a youth pastor for our youth. Because those that are leading the youth, they're not much older than those that they are leading. And our young people also. What happened, why he even said a youth pastor in the community for 2 or 3 churches to help the main pastor that is there. To work with those young people. We've got quite a few of them. Some of them are quite willing. But they need more training. They need, parents, yes, have to train the children. But when they reach certain age as youth, they want somebody who knows more. Somebody who they can relate to. Nearer to their age. So what happened? Because I've been fighting this battle for years, asking, can we have, and I remember the years when Pastor Palmer was in Manchester, and we had other interns passing through to help the youth. But there was nobody. We got Pastor Joe there for 5 minutes, and he was gone. And nobody else there. 1 pastor, 5 churches, and it's not that the churches are on his doorstep. They have to travel distant to get those churches. Ages, it's difficult, and I want to know what the conference are doing about that. Why can't they even send? We have a lot of pastors coming out of New Bold now. Can't they send 1 or 2 in that area to look after the people? We can't just depend on a Bible worker who have their different job to do. Yeah. And I just want them to do something for our young people. We have them who are willing, but some who really need help. And that's what we are not getting. And if we are talking about this, talking about that, but we are going down and young people are coming up. That's why we're losing so much of them from the church.
Now, I hear your heart, I hear your passion and your frustration. I don't have an answer to your question. That needs to be addressed to the administration of the NEC. But yeah, I hear you loud and clear. We need mentors. And that's one of the wider point from the presentation, and this applies to our young couples as well, folks who are either planning to get married or newly married to have senior folks within the church, those who have trod that path and who know how to relate, to come alongside them as mentors, especially during the first year, just to help them to get that footing, that grounding. But your point in terms of mentors for the young people, well taken. I know the challenges in terms of the lack of finances. Maybe that's a conversation that can be resurrected. But I'm not in the position myself to address that. But I hear you loud and clear, and I feel your pain. Are we done? Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Enjoy the rest of the camp meeting.